If you've ever heard the word neurodivergent and thought, I think that might be me, this video is for you. This is a big picture, kind of grounding introduction to neurodiversity, and it's not meant to be a diagnosis guide or any kind of checklist, just a place to kind of start understanding what exactly this all means. But before we begin, there are a few things I would like to cover. First, neurodiversity is a huge topic with a lot of nuance, and there is no way to cover it all in one video. My goal here isn't to explain everything, it's more to help things click enough that you feel oriented instead of overwhelmed. Also, our understanding of neurodivergence is still evolving. Language changes, research gets updated, and that's a good thing. If something I say lands differently for you or you've learned something else, I genuinely welcome that conversation in the comments. And finally, just one last note on language before we dive in. Some people prefer what is called person-first language, like I am a person with ADHD. Others are going to prefer what is called identity-first language, like I am autistic or I am ADHD. What's going to matter most here is personal preference. I personally use identity-first language because my neurodivergence isn't something I see as separate from me. It is something that shapes how I understand myself and the world around me. But the right choice is always going to be the one that honors the individual, so make sure you ask them first. So, what is neurodiversity? Neurodiversity is not a diagnosis. It is more of a philosophy, a way of understanding that human brains naturally vary. The term was popularized in the 1990s, but the idea is much older than that. That neurological differences like ADHD, autism, dyslexia, OCD, and many others aren't signs of brokenness. They are natural variations in how brains develop and function. Just like biodiversity strengthens ecosystems, neurodiversity strengthens humanity. A world where everyone thinks the same wouldn't be interesting or efficient. It would actually be fragile and incredibly boring. Different brains are not a problem to solve. They're a part of how we survive and how we innovate. When people hear the word spectrum, they often imagine a scale like this one that goes from normal on one end to different on the other, and that all people can find themselves somewhere between the two extremes. But that's not actually what a spectrum looks like. A spectrum is more like a full range of colors like this. One that blends and overlaps in infinite variation. And if you were to zoom in very closely, each pixel is a slightly different color than the one next to it, even if they look similar. Under the neurodiversity approach, we see each person as a single pixel in that image. You might share a color scheme, or if we're looking at real life, a diagnosis with someone else, but your experiences, strengths, and challenges will still look different. That's why phrases like everyone's a little on the spectrum kind of misses the point. Differences do exist, but they are patterned and meaningful and real. It might be helpful to understand how that works physically in the brain. And a caveat before I begin, I am not a neuroscientist, and this is going to be a very simplified version of what's going on, but I do think it will help you kind of get the gist. When we're born, we have a huge number of neuroconnections in the brain, and as we grow, the brain prunes those connections away. That is an attempt to make our lives and brain processes more efficient as we navigate through life. But in neurodivergent brains, that pruning process happens a little differently. Some areas get under-pruned, others over-pruned, and that results in a very different experience of the world. It's not a flaw, it's just a different wiring pattern. And those patterns shape how we process information, regulate our emotions, sense the world, and move through our daily lives. One of the most helpful framings for me to understand neurodivergence was through what is called a Spiky profile, or a way of mapping out how different types of thinking and processing show up in one person. Imagine that each color region around this circle represents a different developmental domain. What you'll see mapped out here are an individual's natural access to strengths in each of these different areas. The further out a point goes, the more strength there tends to be, and the closer it is to the center, the more effort and energy or support that area may require. In many neurotypical brains, so those who are not neurodivergent, if you were to map this out for them, the point points in all areas would land somewhere towards the middle of each line, generally speaking. Not perfectly even, but relatively balanced across all areas. Neurodivergent profiles tend to look very different. This right here is my Spiky profile. You can see that I have some very strong peaks, areas where my brain lights up, where thinking comes easily, and I can go deep or fast or intuitive without a whole lot of effort. And you can also see some valleys, areas that take more energy, more structure, or more external support for me to function sustainably. This doesn't mean I can't do those things in those lower areas. It just means for me, the cost is going to be higher. And this is where a lot of people get tripped up. Having a Spiky profile does not mean you're bad at life. It means you're optimized for specific kinds of thinking, not for doing everything equally well all of the time. Strengths and support needs coexist. They do not cancel each other out. So why does all of this matter? Why am I telling you all of this? Because when we ignore Spiky profiles, people get labeled as inconsistent or lazy or dramatic, unreliable, or not living up to their potential. I heard that one a few times. But when we understand them, we can stop asking, why is this so hard for me? And instead start asking what kind of support would make this easier or more sustainable for me. That shift from judgment to design is foundational to everything else we'll talk about here. But this video is just the starting point. From here, we'll talk about self-understanding, regulation, tools, identity, how to unlearn shame, and build lives that feel sustainable, not performative. If you're neurodivergent or questioning, you're not broken, you're not late, and you're not alone. You are welcome here. I'll see you in the next video.